Let's look at how Godot and Blender can work well together. Firstly, I'll create a new project to demonstrate. Make my folder. I don't need to get for this demo. Firstly, you need to make sure that Godot knows where Blender is. So you go to the editor setting and file system, import, and I've already got the Blender path set. So you'll need to find where Blender is installed on your system and tell Godot where it's located. Normally, I would create assets folder and I'll just default 3D scene. And now I'll open up Blender and create content. And the default document I've created in Blender, you just notice that I've removed the default cube, the camera, and the light. Save that as my startup file just to make it easier. So I'll create some meshes and third as well. And now I'm going to save this into my Godot project and documents. And save that. And when I go back to Godot, it'll automatically import the new blend file that I've created. So if I look in my assets folder, there's my blend file, and I can drag this into my scene. And there you go. I've got my Blender objects. I'll create another one. I've got two in there. I've got scat turned on. And there's my two objects. And I can actually take the first one and make it editable children. I can see my two objects inside there, and I can manipulate position, rotation, change scale. You can see that they're operating independently. Okay, if I go back to Blender and I make um, changes to the cone, for example, I might make this odd angle, change the scale. Oh, it's at a different location now. I'll now save that and go back to Godot. It only affected the copy that I created. It didn't affect the that I manipulated, that the edited children. That is not moved. It's written. Yeah. However, if I make changes to the actual model, the cone will be reflected in both. So if I go back to Blender and I edit this one, and I'll just grab a few faces. So I've changed the model now. I'll save that again, go back to Godot, and you'll see that both of those have changed. Another good feature is that you can make non-destructive, um, use modifiers and such, and they're automatically applied. So I'll add a bevel modifier, for example, and I can smooth. I've got a couple of modifiers now. If I save that, you can see my cube has got those modifiers now. They're automatically applied when the Blender import's done. Yeah, pretty cool. I'll create another object now. Blender sphere, for example. And if I hide this, it won't appear in my Blender document. It's invisible. But if I go back to Godot, it is visible. So even though it's hidden, it will still appear. Um, so quite often, if I want to hide something, if I've got something that's under construction or something like that, what I'll do is I'll change the name and just put the suffix no import, no IMP. And now, even though that's visible, if I go back to Godot, it won't be imported. So that's pretty handy. Another thing I might want to do is create collisions for my objects. So for my cube, I'll rename that, and another one of the suffixes you can use is collision, so .col. If I go back to Godot, you'll see that the cube has now got a static body and a collision shape, and it might be a bit faint to actually see the collision shapes. Change that color to something, yeah. So by default, it create concave um, collision shapes. Often, if I'm using something like a cube, create my collisions in Godot instead, make them manually, make style collision, which will be a bit more efficient than this, but it can automatically create collisions as I've shown. And sometimes you uh, want to only create collision. So if I rename this to col only, the actual mesh is not imported anymore, just got a collision. So that can be handy as well. Change that. Okay, let's play with materials. Create a new material, and I'll call this wood. Not gonna be real wood. It's a very simple color here, and I'll apply this to both of my objects. If I save that and go back to Godot, you can see that all of my objects have got the same material applied, which is kind of cool. If we look at the actual object and the mesh and the surface, the material is embedded, and you can't change anything. I can't change this color. So sometimes you'll want to um, reuse materials, and often you'll want to be able to edit them in Godot. So what you can actually do is extract the material. So if I double click on my blend file, I'll get the advanced import options, and I'll go to actions, extract materials, select where to extract to, fine, and it choose which materials to create. So I'll create a resource file, and there you can see that my resource file and the blend file itself, if I look on the import settings, it's now set to use uh, the external resource. So every time I save and re-import, it'll automatically use the external material. And I could use that for another blend file. So I'll create a new one and start another mesh like that. Cylinder, I'll create a new material, make this also wood, and I'll make it a different color. Okay, do that as well. We go back to Godot. I'll change the input settings and I'll use external as well for the material, and I'll link it to the existing material that I created earlier. If I now drag that into my scene, we can see that that's sharing the same material. Look at that cylinder, the surface, and material. Let's see the resource for that. It's using the same external resource. So if I change that material to look different, purple, for example, all my objects are using that. Okay, that's all I've got to show you today. If you've got any tips for using Godot and Blender together, why don't you add a comment below. Thanks for watching.